Hello, hello. My name is Kim Ades, and I'm the president and founder of Frame of Mind Coaching. And I want to welcome you to the Frame of Mind Coaching podcast, where we invite willing individuals, willing leaders to come onto the show and get coached live and on the spot. Today, my guest is Gresham Harkles. Gresham, welcome.
Kim, thanks so much for having me.
So you are the founder and president of Blue Media and CB Nation. What is that? What does that mean? Tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So Blue 16 Media is basically a digital marketing company. We focus on web design and SEO primarily, helping people to increase their visibility and to be found online. And kind of core to what I do is I say every person and every company is in the media business. So figuring out exactly how to create content and information for your target market and working backwards from there. And my media company is called CB Nation. So that's where we have blog posts, daily podcasts, and loads of video content to help entrepreneurs and business owners succeed.
And I know you through that because I get your emails on a regular basis. And when I discovered that you were willing to be on this podcast, I was like doing cartwheels. So I was super excited about that.
While
So
you were
how
doing
long?
cartwheels, I was doing backflips.
I was I'm not the best cartwheel person, by the way, but that's a whole other story. Tell me a little bit about how long you've been doing it and what's your journey been like so far?
Absolutely. So it's definitely been, I guess, the typical entrepreneurial journey where it's kind of the ups and downs, really exciting moments and really not so exciting moments throughout. So I've had the blog, which is really the foundation of everything as far as what I got started with. And that is called CEO Blog Nation. It's a part of CB Nation. But I've had that, I want to say, for maybe 8 to 9 or 10 years.
Okay.
So it started out literally as a labor of love. I've always been interested in entrepreneurship. I've always not known I was an entrepreneur. So it was me being around entrepreneurs and business owners, interviewing them, where I really felt like I felt at home. So during that time, about probably a couple years after that, so 8 years from now, I started a Blue 16 Media, and that was largely because I had always kind of tinkered with technology. And my mom has an embroidery business. And so I did a lot of stuff, not knowing that it was of value to anybody else. And I happened to connect to somebody in the networking group. And that's where I really got serious, more serious about the business. And that's been about 8 years or so from there.
Okay. And so as you look back over the years, like what have been your greatest wins and what have been your greatest struggles? Again, in the past, I'm not talking about right now. We're going to get to right now in a minute, but kind of like looking in the rear view window or mirror, what does it look like?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, greatest wins. I mean, I think that I didn't necessarily grow up or know that I had an environment in which I could even start a business. So in and of itself, and just having a business and actually getting your first client, I don't think anything is probably more exciting than that, than realizing that, oh, I had this idea and I thought I could help somebody and somebody also thought I can help them and we get to actually work together. So it's hard to kind of move from that very first, client or very first, I guess, check you get from doing work. But I think just as far as like being able to be recognized, in Alexandria, Virginia as 40 under 40, be able to kind of donate services to organizations and nonprofits. It's hard to, pick one, but I think I try to just, stay true to like any small wins. As far as the biggest probably struggles is probably I'm fairly so I'm an only employee. So we have a team of people, a team of 8. So probably the biggest struggle, as most business owners and entrepreneurs have, is bringing on people, bringing on the right people, getting them onboarded in the correct way. That's always a constant kind of struggle, being able to bring on the right people, but also keep them, making sure you're able to kind of scale out those relationships as well too, and still continue to kind of build the business because, you end up juggling so many different things. And that's probably as a whole, probably 2 of the things that come to mind, at least right now.
So go back to something you said. I think it's very important for us to understand a little bit of your view of things so that we can kind of then jump into your current day challenge. You said, I didn't grow up in an environment where I thought I could be an entrepreneur. Did I capture that correctly?
Yes.
So talk to me about what you mean by that. What kind of environment did you grow up in, and why is this like a surprise to you in a way? Not
Well,
anymore, but at the time.
yeah, I mean, it's still something I'm super grateful for. I think I grew up in an environment where my parents both have stable jobs. My dad did the military, works for the government. My mom worked for a utility at that time. So those are both pretty stable kind of industries to be in. So I think when you're around that environment and you're potentially going to do something that might be a little, I guess, against the grain, so to speak, a little bit different. A lot of times you get pushback, and I always say that I feel like I got pushback from love as far as not wanting to see me fail. But at the same time, it can sometimes kind of really not give you as much confidence to be able to build that business. So that's where, the blog and interviewing entrepreneurs and business owners, being in the networking groups helped out a lot as far as like me being able to get past that to some degree. But it is something that I know that every time I told, at that time, my parents, even friends, that this is something that I wanted to do. Not only that, but I felt like was my calling. I got a lot of pushback and heard a lot of not so kind things at times as well.
So tell me what that pushback specifically sounded like. What were the not so nice things? Like I want to really grasp how that kind of created a bit of a lingering effect potentially.
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing, like I heard, I don't think you're going to fail, but I don't want to see you lose all your money or something like that. So kind of saying you're going to fail, but not saying you're going to fail. So kind of those sideward things. I remember hearing, especially because I was younger. So I also grew up, another backstory is I grew up, I graduated during the economic crisis as well, too. So there's a lot of chaotic things happening. So I read a lot of stuff about entrepreneurship and business and know that sometimes during, chaotic times is where opportunities present themselves. So anyways, I say all that to say, I also heard that I don't know anybody that starts out by, starting their own business. They work for 10, 20 years and then they become, an expert at whatever it is that they do. Then they decide to start a business. So sometimes I would hear stuff like that.
So in other
Um,
words, you don't have the expertise.
I get you don't have the expertise and that's how nobody does it. So you can't do it that way because nobody does it that way, so to speak. So, those are two things that kind of come to mind right now. I'm sure there was many, many more. I know as a matter of fact, I was dating a girl at the time and she said, why don't I just get a regular job? And, you hear things like that and it all starts to kind of build up.
Okay. So what is your current challenge? And the reason that I went back in history, because my experience in coaching, specifically highly driven leaders, is that the stuff that they hear as they are going through their journey leaves an imprint. So let's kind of look at what's happening right now. And perhaps, again, we haven't dug in whether or not that imprint is still alive for you.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think my biggest challenge that I often call my Achilles heel is focusing. Just being able to kind of focus. I know how important it is to focus on kind of one thing. You can do multiple things, I guess you can say, but really want to hone in on one thing to really get to the level that you want to get to. And then those dominoes, so to speak, start to fall. So I think that's something that I always kind of struggle with to some degree.
So are you saying that because you have your business and the blog and the podcast, that those are many things?
I think that they're related, but I think that I can't say that I put all of my energy or even let's just say 90% or 80% into one thing. I feel like it's a lot more split. Even though it's gotten a little bit better because I've been able to kind of merge them together, it still isn't as, I guess, one focused or one minded or has that kind of simultaneous energy towards that one domino, so to speak.
So do you, and again, I'm just exploring. So I want to ask you two questions. One is, what do you think stops you from focusing? And what do you think you need to do to focus?
It's funny enough when you were saying that sometimes things in the past will kind of create or maybe plant seeds to where you're holding on to things today. Because I think one of the reasons that I don't focus is honestly probably fear. And that fear is around failing, is around kind of, how do I put this? Giving truth to what people said when they said that I couldn't do it. And I feel like I probably still have that kind of I'm going to show you mentality, but I think that also probably takes away from me really like honing in, being and trusting and going through the process. And I feel like my way of focus is actually through activity. So I actually get more active. I mean, my way of fear, I should say, is by being more active. So I will do additional things because I'm always thinking of what if this doesn't work out. And I feel like sometimes that might take away from me really focusing as well as I could and
So
having an
you're
impact.
saying that you do more stuff just in case this
Right.
other plan doesn't work.
Right.
Okay, got it. So, and really what you're saying is I have this massive fear of failures. So therefore, I'm bowling down many lanes at the same time, just in case those other lanes don't, I don't, what is it? Bowl a strike? What's the word? What's the
Yes,
language?
that's the right word.
That's the
I'm always looking for
language.
the strike.
You're always looking for the strike. Okay. And so this is very interesting. And what happens when you have doubt about your success? Do you share it with anybody or do you keep it in?
Good question. I mean, I have shared it more as I've gotten older. I think when I was younger, when I first started my business, I kind of held everything in. I still have some of that, largely because I kind of felt as if I don't want to say the world was against me or anything, but I didn't know who I had to be. And I still feel like I have to be very careful about who I share certain things with because I want to make sure that I'm not, I'm surrounding myself around the right people. And I think that sometimes if you tell people what you're hoping to do, what you're hoping to accomplish, they may push that down or knock that down for whatever reason. So I am still kind of guarded, but I'm probably a little bit more open than I was in the beginning of starting my business.
Okay. And the other question that I had that we still haven't gotten to, which was, what do you think you need to do in order to focus? Like, what needs to change in your mind?
Um, Probably, I guess the trust, I guess, would be something that's huge because we're talking about fear, I probably have to look at that honestly and I don't want to say accept that, but just not camouflage it as something else. Understand that that fear is real and it might have come from those seeds planted, years ago. And I think just honestly trust myself and trust the work that I put in and just kind of go forward from there and understand that um, I feel like everything hasn't always worked out perfectly for me up to this moment. So if I was able to figure it out then if it doesn't now or in the future, I can still be resilient and kind of pivot and do all those things that are needed.
Okay, so and let me and I'm going to come back to that in a second, but again, if you were just to focus on one thing, does that mean you have to eliminate others? Like, what is the actual strategic decision you might make about what to focus on? What would you let go of? What would you simplify? Like, how would you do things?
That's a great question. I think between the two, the Blue 16 Media and CB Nation, I feel like one is a lot more um, it's a lot more service based. So I feel like it's a lot more taxing as far as like resources and time, especially. But I'm usually helping other clients kind of build, their businesses and things. I think the real kind of thing that I wanted to focus on, I still want to focus on, is still kind of a block as far as like going maybe more all in with that is the CB Nation, because I do create a lot of content and a lot of kind of information. So to answer your question, I think it's more of me focusing on that, but I always feel like there's a tension as far as me um, maybe not having that or as much recurring revenue coming in,
Right.
and that kind of block for me.
Excuse me.
Last year.
Okay, so I want to kind of go back to a few things. I definitely want to talk about strategy, but I want to talk about fear first. And I want to say to you that in my experience as a coach, one of the things I discovered is how extraordinary leaders make decisions. And, do they have a different level of optimism or confidence than other people? Not necessarily. What they do have is an ability to look at the decisions in front of them and critically assess them. And so what they do is they say, okay, so if I make this decision, what will it look like if I fail? Strange, right? That's not what you expected. But they say, if I fail, here's how I will recover. And so they envision failing, but not just failing, they envision failing and recovering. And if they have that clearly in their minds, then they relax and they go full steam ahead. If they cannot envision recovery, then they do not go full steam ahead. Does that make sense? And so exactly what you said before, I failed in the past and I recovered. Why can't I trust myself to do that? Because you haven't really spent time in that area thinking that through and envisioning what it would look like to totally explode. What would happen to me if things all went out the window, right? So I encourage you to do that. And more specifically, I encourage you to do that actually in writing, in a journal format. So here's my goal. Here's what I want. Here's what absolute and utter failure looks like. And here's what recovery looks like. Okay, so those are 3 different journals, right? So journal number 1, here's my goal. Journal number 2 is here's what failure looks like. Journal number 3, here's how I bounce back from that. And now I want you to add another piece to it, which is journal number 4. In journal number 4, I want you to just imagine absolute success. Skip the failure. Okay, so now that you have some degree of comfort that you can recover, now I want you to design a picture of going from where you are to thriving. Absolute abundance, success, you're on top of the world, you're winning. What does that look like? What does that sound like? What is happening to you? And then I want you to focus on that vision. So let's put that aside for a minute. So you think that you have to decide between these 2 brands, right? You think you have to decide between CB Nation and Blue 16 Media. And I would encourage you to perhaps, maybe you have to pick, maybe you're right, but before you choose, I want you to think about it differently. And I want you to think about if one of them owned the other. Doesn't matter which one. If CB Nation owned Blue 16 Media, how would Blue 16 Media serve CB Nation and vice versa? So rather than thinking about them as separate entities, think about them as serving the other. So why am I asking you to do that? Because the question becomes, how do my efforts here serve my cause, serve my purpose, serve my mission? And if you get clear on what your mission is, you Gresham, what your mission is, then you would say, how do these serve the overall mission? Because right now it feels like your mission is actually divided. And they're not serving that one purpose. So when you think about that one thing, what is the one thing? You think it's this or that, but it's neither. And you have to spend some time thinking about what is your core purpose. I'll give you an example, okay? My core purpose is helping people live lives that have greater ease, peace, joy, and exhilaration through frame of mind coaching. Period. End of story. That is our mission as a company, and that's my mission as a human being. And we typically do that through our coaching programs. And so for the longest time, I was running this podcast called Frame of Mind Coaching, where we were interviewing experts. It was great, but I wasn't delivering my mission. It wasn't consistent with my mission. And I felt very frustrated. I felt very at odds with what we were doing. Because I felt like, yes, this is great, but it's not delivering the kind of value, and it's not doing what I want it to do. And so I was challenged one day by someone who said, hey, you actually need to be coaching on your podcast because that is aligned with your mission. And I was like, wow, I have all kinds of reasons why nobody would want to come on my podcast and get coached live and in person. And I'm like, who's going to want to do that? And I was wrong. I was wrong. There are people who want to do that, and it's the perfect platform for me to continue my mission. That overarching mission. And I think for you, what's missing is, how do these two entities feed my mission? Does it mean that I need to let one go? Maybe, maybe not. And then the next part of this conversation is, what resources do I need at my disposal that I'm not currently tapping into that would help me serve my mission where these two entities are concerned? Because typically what we do is we're like, well, if it were really to serve my mission, it would do X, Y, and Z, but I would need money or people or talent or something in order to make that happen. You're like, well, I can't do all of it by myself. And that's the thinking that causes limitation. Right? So, number one in this conversation, we want to look at the fear. We want to imagine failing and recovering, and we want to imagine success. Number two is we want to look at these two entities and look at how they serve the overarching mission. And number three is we want to look at the resources that we're tapping into to see if they're serving our mission. And if we need added resources, how can we really get creative about bringing them on board? What do you think?
I love that. And it's so funny because I recently created my mission statement. But you know what I didn't do is I didn't relook at everything I was doing through that mission statement and do that evaluation. So what you said actually hit home, because I've been for 8 years and 9 years, been running this business in a certain way. And I just, went through an exercise to figure out this is my mission statement, but I haven't went back and said, are these things in alignment with that? And if not, like you said, what resources do I need to look at? What changes do I need to make? Can I evolve it? Can I pivot? What can I do? But I haven't actually done that.
So that's your litmus test, right? Mm-hmm. So you might look at both of these companies and say, do they fuel my mission? If not, what do I need to change? If not, can I let this go? Mm-hmm. And that's how you know that that's the one thing you're focused on. As opposed to focus on what you're doing, when you're focused on your mission, every opportunity that comes through the door, you're able to say, does it serve my mission? If yes, then it's a green light. If no, I pass.
Yeah.
Right?
I love that.
I hope that helped.
It did. I appreciate it.
Gresham, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Thank you for sharing your challenge with us. I loved it. I thought it was really interesting. I think a lot of people have a hard time focusing on that one thing, so I appreciate it. And for those of you who are listening, if there is a challenge that you want to share on the podcast, please reach out to me. My email address is kim@frameofmindcoaching.com. And if there's a challenge that you are not willing to share on the podcast, please reach out to me anyways. My email address is kim@frameofmindcoaching.com. Thank you all for tuning in. Gresham, thank you again. And I do hope that this is the beginning of a really great relationship together.
Me too, Kim. Thank you.